this miracle today performed by Jesus, as in so many other of Jesus' miracles, that person was incapable of showing himself to Jesus all by himself. The deaf man had support from others around him. The hope and faith of those other people was expressed in trying to get that man up to see Jesus. They were asking Jesus to help this poor deaf man. In the world at Jesus' time, and just about the same today, we're no different, the deaf man's affliction would have meant he was cut off from social interactions. Have you ever met a deaf person in your lifetime and you just don't feel right? You almost want to run away because they're talking to you in a kind of a strange tone because they cannot hear themselves. And you feel a little uncomfortable. I know I have. I'll be the first to admit it. And so social interactions, because the person is different, is a problem. His education, I'm sure if he was a Gentile, but his education probably wasn't that good at Jesus' time. Today a little bit better for those suffering from infirmities like that. Employment at Jesus' time was difficult if you had anything like leprosy or you were deaf or blind. And I'm sure friendship was difficult. These people were outcasts. This person would have definitely be shunned by society. Something was odd about him, so they would consider him third class. And even today, I believe deaf people are third class, considered that way. Blind people the same. People with MR given third class seating. They're considered, even the poor people, like the immigrants, third class citizenship. They're considered by the present administration, including small children and infants that we saw this year, not like us white folk. We have a very bad administration, and I'm not going to mince any words about it anymore. Terrible. In some ways, this man's alienation would have been even more total than being a leper. For lepers, as you remember, traveled together and they made little communities. But this guy here didn't even have a colony, a leper colony to belong to. The people that brought him to Jesus may possibly have been his family, I would think, or friends at least. If they were friends, their friendship in this case would have spoken about a wonderful sensitivity they had and much compassion for this poor man. Our society shuns those who might be different on all levels. And as I said today, we have the White House who's declared, let's face it, war on the poor. How shallow of them. I was told yesterday of a woman who gives out food certificates to those who are poor, those who are homeless. She was handing one out to a man for a Chinese restaurant. I believe the Chinese restaurant was a local restaurant. I don't know the name of it. But the woman, the man said to her, "You need not give me these certificates. They won't let me in there. They won't allow me to buy food." The woman did like Jesus did and took matters into her own hands, which is a great sign of her faith and belief in Jesus. She went to talk to the staff, I assume at the counter. And she said, "You mean to tell me that you will not serve this man who has money in form of certificates for his lunch, for his food?" Apparently the man was served, or she was going to report this restaurant to the authorities. She acted in the place of Jesus, and I was happy to hear this story. She provided food for him, but not only food, but she fought for his dignity, something that the White House was incapable of doing. There seems also to have been a real sensitivity on Jesus' part too, because Jesus wasn't making a big show of it. What did he do? He told the man, come this way. He took him away from the line of the crowd. The man was deaf, so verbal communication with Jesus was almost impossible. To secure the man's undivided attention, he took him away. He took him away to a quiet place and putting his fingers into the man's ears and touching his tongue were a way of conveying his attention, because the man couldn't understand Jesus. But Jesus was giving attention right to him, specifically to him by doing that. Spittle was sometimes seen in antiquity and in Jesus' time as a therapeutic agent. By spitting, he probably was letting the man know that he was about to touch him and heal him. Jesus looked up to heaven in a gesture of prayer to his Father. He sighs, possibly because of his recognition of the alienation effects the man's condition had. Jesus had compassion, and through that sigh, we see that compassion. The words open in Aramaic were used by Jesus. It would have been unintelligible to the man at all. The man could not hear Jesus. For some reason, this detail has been preserved in the tradition that Jesus says this word. Jesus' attention of healing had a different meaning in Gentile territory. Now realize he wasn't among his own. This was a Gentile man. Among his own people, it served to illustrate the intervention that God had in history. That's what Jesus was doing, showing the Jewish people how God had intervened in history. But this was different with this man. He did this out of pure compassion. Jesus did not see his walk among the Gentile territory as a missionary enterprise like he did with the Jews. If anything, it was to get away from the pressure of the mounting crowds that were constantly around him. He needed to get on the other side of the border for a while into Gentile territory so he could rest a bit. He directed him, the gospel says, tell nothing to anyone, but however much he directed them, they spread the news even more. You know, when you tell somebody a secret and you say, don't say a word, you can know that within a day, the whole town knows it. Everybody knows it. Jesus' insistence that they tell no one mirrored similar requests that he made in his ministry in Galilee to the Jewish people as well. The danger then had been that a volatile Jewish crowd would misinterpret his identity. That's why he wouldn't let them know who he was, because they would misinterpret, the Jews would misinterpret his identity. Who could know what sense a group of pagans, Gentiles, would have made of his actions? Jesus, who had moved over the border to escape, is still working, is still healing, is still compassionate. This was very real in Mark's community. We're looking at the Gospel of Mark today. The present faith and openness to Jesus was found in that small community. It was a world that could not initially join in Christian enterprise because it was ignorant of it. It could not speak because they had not heard about God, but now they would. Once the ignorance was removed and hearing became possible, the participation in Christian mission would follow with St. Paul, who went to the Gentiles. But Jesus is opening the ground by even going to the Gentiles at this point. But St. Paul himself would be the one to carry the message to the pagans and the Gentiles. Today, we have a chance to open our ears to God's people, as that woman did at the Chinese restaurant. And how do we do this? We do it just like Jesus. For children, we need to take them apart like Jesus did. The parents need to pull them aside sometimes. Take the video game off of them. Pull the phone away from them. Look directly at them as Jesus did, so that he could open their minds, their ears, and their hearts. Don't be afraid to take that telephone off them. They become almost mesmerized by this little box in front of them. They can't believe what they see. It's an addiction that starts very small. And then, by the time they're 13, they're at the table, and they're texting their friends while they're eating. Pull that phone off of them. Don't be afraid to. If they don't like you, that's too bad, as they say. We can also do this for ourselves so that we are not deaf to the Word of God. When I say Word of God, I don't just mean what's in these words here in the Scriptures. That's far from it. I mean God speaking directly to you. And you know what he does when a situation comes up like this lady with the tickets, the certificates. God was speaking to her to go speak to this restaurateur. Not only do we find God in the Scriptures, he's definitely there, but we find him also in our hearts. If we are tuned in, if we are not deaf, God speaks all day long, every minute, minute to moment to minute. So, unplug yourself from the TV, video games, get out of this thing called virtual reality, get off of Facebook for a moment, put it away. Some people I've read take the whole month off from Facebook, and then they realize they never needed it in the beginning. There's plenty of time to compare your vacations with other people, compare what you're eating for dinner with other people, compare what you have material, taking pictures and showing everyone what you have. Sometimes this type of mentality on Facebook is a look at me. Look what I got. Look what I got. Look what you don't get. So we have to be very, very careful with Facebook on what we post, and also that we don't get into this materialistic view of watching what somebody else is having for dinner, eating a lobster, 35-pound lobster. Isn't that nice? Isn't that wonderful? Are you thinking about the man at the Chinese restaurant while you're gorging yourself on your 35-pound lobster? I don't know. I'm very anti-Facebook these days. So unplug yourself for a while, even if you can't get away from Facebook or Twitter. Unplug yourself for a while so that our deafness will be healed by Jesus, and God may heal all of us by just listening to him and not the idle chatter on social media.